close. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. Please note that all lines have been muted to reduce any kind of background noise during the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer by the end of the presentation or follow up with you offline. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be emailed to you. Just to tell you a little bit about Carahsoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider supporting public sector organizations across federal, state, and local government agencies, including education and healthcare markets. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to our speakers. The floor is all yours.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. Thank you very much to the Carahsoft team for putting this together and frankly for inviting ServiceNow and Configure Tech to be part of it. Just for quick introductions, my name is Cameron Soleil. I am a Southeast Regional Director from ServiceNow and focus on our public sector business, most specifically working with state and local government clients and K-12 partners. Shannon, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Shannon Lake. I'm the president of Configure Tech, and we're a ServiceNow partner, and we focus on implementations and strategies for federal, local, state organizations and governments to transform their operation.
Right. That's right. Thank you, Shannon. Uh, for the group that's on today, I can see we have plus or minus 20 attendees here, which is great. Thank you all very much for joining us. And when we saw the list of folks in advance of getting started, it looked like we have a great mix of folks that work across public sector, be it state government, local government, K-12, and our federal government customers and clients as well. Just sort of like Sarah did a little bit of housekeeping on our side, Shannon and I don't really intend to go through a whole bunch of slideware with you. We're kind of thinking about running this a little bit podcast style and having a conversation as we think about, the concept of using ServiceNow as a platform to support the enterprise. That is our agency, our department, and all of our different groups within the agencies and departments in which we work, and not only as a platform for IT. We've known for years. I've been at ServiceNow for 11 and a half years. And for that whole time, and even before I got here, ServiceNow has always been well known as an ERP for IT, helping streamline business process from an IT perspective for the IT business. However, really rewinding back maybe 7 or 8 years when a lot of clients started to use this platform to support a lot more than just IT service management. Now, this is truly the AI platform for business and technology transformation. We are a platform upon which you can help route work more efficiently. It doesn't really matter what that work is. And so our discussion topics today will range across a number of different things. Things like foundational work for some success of this platform in the government space. We'll talk a little bit about why agencies are expanding beyond IT. Talk a little bit about AI and virtual agents because, AI, we can't go 5 minutes these days without talking about AI. So it is the buzzword of 2025. I think if Time did a technology buzzword, AI would certainly be at the top of it. So we'll talk a little bit about AI in the context of government, which is uniquely different than our clients that are using ServiceNow in the private sector commercial space. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about ROI, budget sustainability, and those kinds of things, as well as workforce and a couple of other topics. I do want to make one plea, though, to the group. This is a lot better if there are questions from y'all, right? So if for those that are on the line, and of course those that are watching this recording later, you won't have the pleasure of this, but for those that are on the line, the 20 attendees that are here, if y'all have questions or comments or things that you want to chime in about, realistic examples of as we're having a particular topic, maybe talking about AI, and you want to come in and talk about some of the things that you're dealing with in your agency, department, or group, we'd love to hear that. If you raise your hand, I believe, Sarah, we can take folks off of mute. You can ask a question live or post a question in the QA, and we can answer that live as well. So, Sarah, if you can help me with the chat. And Shannon, if you see something when you're talking, I'll be checking as well. That way we can have a little bit of a dialogue and it's not true podcast where you're just listening to Shannon and I drone on the whole time. Is that fair enough, Shannon?
Absolutely. Sounds
Okay,
great.
good. All right. Well, getting right into the meat of things, the focus of today really is beyond IT, maximizing ServiceNow's value across government workflows. So Shannon, we'll talk about this a little bit and just sort of let's start with why agencies are using ServiceNow to expand beyond IT. I'll start by just commenting, like I said, I've been here 11 and a half years. From jump, ServiceNow has always been a platform for IT service management. Many folks on the phone may not know this, or those that are watching the recording. Interestingly enough, when Fred Luddy, the founder of this company, started ServiceNow, he came from an IT service management background, but he created a platform for application development. This was not a platform for IT service management. It was a platform for application development. And he went to his venture capitalists and said, "Hey, I need some money to start a company." And they said, "Great, what do you have?" And he said, "I have this platform, I have this thing." And they said, "Okay, well, what does it do?" And he said, "Well, what do you want it to do?"
Right.
And they said, "Well, that's not a product. So go make something and then come back to us." He had a background in IT service management, having come from Peregrine Systems, and he said, "Okay, let's make ITSM better." So he created a ITSM application, incident problem change, and so on top of the ServiceNow platform, not intending necessarily to create an ITSM tool, but just being the first entry or entree, if you will, as an application built on the platform. So fast forward to today, Shannon, and I'll turn it over to you. As a president of Configure Tech, who does so much consulting with all different kinds of mainly public sector, but lots of private sector clients as well.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of clients saying, "Hey, I think it's time for us to make this shift and use this platform outside of IT"? And then the second part to that question will be, how often are you seeing clients start by using the ServiceNow platform outside of IT?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. As you were talking, I was thinking about one of the realities of public sector, which is that in the IT service management space, a lot of funny enough, the IT service management feature sets are still in place by more legacy applications. So it's interesting that in public sector, the discussions we're having oftentimes are outside of IT because it is a group or part of the organization that has to manage reaching out to constituents or putting in a better process. And oftentimes the IT side of the house is been in place for years with a BMC or an HP or something like that. And so they oftentimes don't look originally at ServiceNow for that. We start talking about things like legal or constituent support or whatever it happens to be. Those become part of the dialogue up front. So I think part of it is just this part of the kind of initial points are some organizations start from an IT perspective, but there are quite a few organizations that start outside of IT and then come inwards. And then they realize the value, and then they're like, well, wait a second, we can transform if you're a state, we can transform each of our agencies around this platform, and then that dialogue starts to become much more prevalent,
Yeah,
both for IT and non-IT related
yeah,
efforts.
yeah.
So
I would agree. I'll expand upon that and say, from my perspective, in my experience working with clients across the country, and more particularly in recently in the Southeast region, Shannon, you and I partner together with a large city in the Southeast, and this was an opposite from what you were talking about. They started with ServiceNow from an IT perspective,
yeah,
and then realized very quickly, "Hey, I don't think we're using this platform to its fullest potential." And came to both of us and said, "Hey, we need let's have a discussion about what really is the function and the capability of the ServiceNow platform." And you stepped in with your team and started really to talk about not, "Hey, here's this product and here's all the SKUs that ServiceNow has and here's the ways that they can be deployed." Rather, taking a different approach and saying, and this is, for all those that are listening, this is one of those things that is really easily said, but not always easily done. Taking a step back and saying, "Hey, what processes do we have? What are the things that we do on a day-to-day basis that maybe don't operate as efficiently as we might want them to. Procurement. But lots of yeah, that was a joke. Lots of other processes internally in an agency or in an organization that just don't flow really smoothly, take many steps. There's a lot of email, there's a lot of text message, there's a lot of spreadsheet. And this particular city was saying, how can we take some of these things that we do today and make them more efficient? And that day that you spent with them, I know was here's how you can maximize the use of this platform that you already own, talking about
Yeah.
quick and rapid application development. The focus of that conversation was not about go buy these SKUs from ServiceNow. It was about you own all of this stuff from ServiceNow already today. Here's some ways in which you can maximize that. And for those on the phone, we're not trying to be ambiguous. The answer is there are lots of functions that are native to the ServiceNow platform, and you get lots and lots of stuff with your licensing that you buy from ServiceNow. And in a short conversation with someone like Shannon or your account team or whomever from ServiceNow, there are lots of areas where you can expand in using the platform within the guidelines of what you already own to do application development, to create apps or create workflows, more importantly, that support different business units. So that was sort of an opposite example of a client that had ServiceNow for IT, but realized that they had other business processes that they needed to support. And frankly, they they realized, okay, I got this platform, but I don't quite know how to do it. Can you help me understand that? Did I hit that generally, Shannon?
Yeah, no, 100%. And the thing I would add to your description is that when we sat down and we were talking, in this case, the CIO was involved, the larger team was involved. There were other parts of the city that were involved in this specific discussion. What we ended up doing was really removing what people thought we would be talking about and removing what they understood from their licensing and started talking about strategically what were the objectives that they were trying to meet. And that's across, as a whole, not just like from an IT perspective. And then at that point we can step back and say, okay, well, listen, you've already got, right? You don't have to go through the procurement activity of, the RFPs and the procurement activity and all these other things that that create massive slowdowns sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through all of that to get to value, right?
Yep.
So we can start talking about value with what you've already got in place.
That's
Funny
right.
enough, IT service management, the licensing, if you will, not to dig too deep into it, but the licensing for ITSM actually affords an organization to do a lot more than ITSM right out the chute. So if you happen to have on the call, if you happen to have ITSM licensing, there's a lot more you can do with ITSM licensing right now that is not ITSM focused necessarily, that will start to help you build momentum inside the organization to really then start to uncover what ServiceNow can do at a much larger scale for you.
That's
So,
right.
and that's kind of what we ended up, talking about and the strategy that we put in place. So,
Yeah, that's right. I would encourage anybody that heard that and their ears perked up to obviously, if you have ServiceNow today, reach out to the folks that support you and have that conversation. And you're welcome to tell them you heard it here, and we can be part of that if we need to as well. Aaron asked a great question, Shannon, in the Q&A. I'm gonna answer it live here. So Aaron's first question was, when you move ServiceNow outside of IT, how do you govern the other departments who want to continue with their own workflow and processes when you're trying to get everyone on board with a platform that must work for everyone? By the way, this is a great question, and we get this all the time.
yeah.
40 departments can't have their own way to do things as they always have. So Shannon, I'll let you maybe speak to that first. I might chime in after.
Yeah, here's what I would say to that. First of all, depends on your organization as to how you approach this. But I have seen organizations mandate that there be a transition because of a global strategy, and that is hard sometimes. So what we've ended up doing, I can tell you, this is a large space agency or even yeah, I won't even say who this customer is, but both two large government organizations. And one of the things that we had to do is we had to enforce as far as we could enforce, and then publish a standard to say, listen, if you're going to do it your way, then you need to integrate to our systems using this standard and this data, et cetera, et cetera. And what that does is that starts to really move the needle from, I can't get anything done to, okay, we have a standard that majority of the organizations are complying to and some aren't. And either you manage that exception or eventually they feel the pressure of not necessarily being part of it and start to look at the cost and the value benefit and all those things. And that transitions over time. So those are the two ways that I've seen organizations really start to enforce some level of feedback. And in states, as an example, there's a lot of there's a lot of groups like, state of Missouri has ITSD, state of Georgia has the GTA, Georgia Technology Authority. There's a lot of groups out there that provide support as part of their activity and then mandate that specific organizations either comply or use them in some form. So it just depends on, just like I said, depends on the state and the organization. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I don't have, I won't jump too far over the top of what you said, Shannon, but I'll just comment, Aaron. First of all, great question. Every single group, every single client that I've ever worked with deals with this same issue, right? You've got a lot of shadow IT happening out there, right? And in a consolidation strategy, we try to bring it all together so we can operate from greater efficiencies by using less platforms and having everybody work in one place. I think for me, what I've seen outside of what Shannon said, which is a lot of, I'll just call it top-down pressure, right? Getting executive leadership to say, hey, look, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And everybody's got to kind of get on board with that. Aaron, I don't know your role in the organization in which you work or the agency or department. If you have that authority, fantastic, right? That's one way to do it. The other way is, I think for me, what I've seen with clients, and this actually is not even a government example. 11 years ago, one of my clients was Pier 1 Imports. Now, I can say that because they've since gone out of business. It has nothing to do with their use of ServiceNow, by the way. But Pier 1 Imports, a long time ago, they started with, they wanted to do incident and change. And again, this was 11 years ago, right? So that was sort of obviously and squarely within our wheelhouse. Not that it is today, but it was what we were doing. And very, very quickly, they realized, okay, we've got this platform that can do lots of different things. And so we worked together, the ServiceNow team, the CIO, and I and my team worked together to put together like essentially a road show, Aaron, to show internally. I went into their office for a week. It was a half a day every day for 5 days. And we had a ServiceNow session. And we had different topical sessions. So one was around HR, one was around procurement, one was around general application development. I'm forgetting what the other two were. And we did this by education. So rather than the stick approach, we took the carrot approach, right? We dangled it out there to say, hey, we've got this platform that can do lots of things, and we think we can help you. So we started with this education thing, and then we sat down with the ServiceNow team and we said, okay, where are some workflow areas across Pier 1 where we think it can operate more efficiently? And then we went to that team and said, hey, you sat in on our session last week. Here's how we actually think that we can help you. So, Aaron, this is not an easy answer to give. There's certainly not one silver bullet. The reality is you're always going to have people that push back and say, my tool is mine. I want to use it and don't take it away from me. And it's better than anything else you can give me. But I've found personally that going to them with some sort of pre-thought out outcome, I know what your process is. I know how it can be made better. And here's an example of how we can do it. It helps sort of bridge that initial gap. And then you start working your way toward how do we sunset some of these other tools and work in one consolidated area. Thank you, Aaron. I'm glad that was helpful. By the way, Aaron, I did see that you asked a second question. I also see Aaron with an E, not Aaron with an A. We have two Aaron.
Exactly. I was going to say something about
Yeah,
that.
right. And then I see Suzanne. All great questions. And Greg, this is fantastic. We do have some topical things that Shannon and I were going to discuss, but I'd frankly like to keep going with a couple of these questions. Is that okay with you, Shannon?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, great. So Aaron, Aaron with an A. Otherwise, I have a friend that spells it the same way, Aaron, and of course we call him Aaron. So sorry about that. So how to be successful with procurement and have departments adhere to IT processes instead of going out and purchasing products under their own processes. I think that sort of dovetails into the previous conversation that we were having, right? And one of the things that I've done, and Shannon, I'm gonna go ahead and answer this one, then we can move on to Aaron with an ease question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, um, uh, one of the things that I've done is in almost every, particularly government organization that I've worked in that provides any type of shared service, be it central IT or otherwise, but most commonly central IT. There's a concept of a BRM or somebody who's sort of a liaison between that central IT group and the agencies or the departments or the customers, right? Um, I've actually found it to be quite successful with clients when we educate those BRMs. Forgive me for using that term if that's not what everybody else uses, but those liaisons between the department, the central department, and the other customers, right? The other agencies. Here's the reason why. Oftentimes, for IT purchases, this only happens really in consolidated environments. So if you don't have this, Aaron, or other folks, I'm sorry, and we could talk about that maybe separately. But in consolidated environments, anybody that wants to go buy IT tools typically has to run that up through IT, right? And um, and if those BRMs are the initial touch point for that purchase request, then they're educated enough to say, hey, we actually have this platform that you can do all of these different things with. Rather than go out and buy this point solution, let's find out if we can do it with something that we already own. And that just is that's a muscle memory change, right?
Yeah.
And getting people to say to push back just slightly instead of just saying yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, and going forward to helping them with that initial procurement. Go
And
ahead.
and then so let me add just one thing before you move on, which is that, in quite a few commercial organizations, that concept is actually a citizen developer mindset and mentality. So I haven't seen it as much in government organizations, but certainly in commercial organizations, this idea of citizen developer enabling different teams to use ServiceNow in the way that they want to use it. And that is one of the really good things about the platform is that you can, when you talk about, going back to this same topic, you can in fact set up the platform to be able to be utilized by different teams to do what they want to do. And so your job, like you said, with a roadshow is to show them the power of what they could potentially do with the platform and give them the capability to be able to do those updates. So
Yeah.
just a thought as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Aaron, hopefully that was helpful. Please feel free to post any other questions, or we could always get in touch with you after the fact and have some additional dialogue. Aaron with an E, I see your question here. I'm actually going to save that one as we get toward the end. It's a little bit more tactical, specific to those features within ITSM, but I don't want to dismiss it. I just wanted to comment that I see it. Suzanne, you asked a question about organization managing the move from the form, right? The paper form, right? Over to a digital experience. And you use an example like a permit and a service catalog request and getting those emails with the confirmations. That's a great question. Um, I'm happy to speak about this because it is in fact public safety, public facing, and it is something anybody can go see. This was something that the state of South Dakota, when they rolled out ServiceNow for full stack constituent engagement, that they contended with. And Shannon, I'm happy to pass it over to you here in a moment. Um, what I'll say is, if first of all, I mentioned the state of South Dakota. If you go to sd.gov, the new South Dakota website, new as of actually about 2 years ago now, is full stack built on ServiceNow. So if you think about it, ServiceNow is the portal that all of us are familiar with, is really just a website. that is catered around request fulfillment. What are most government websites? They're there for request fulfillment and information delivery, right? So they decided, hey, we could just use the external facing service portal from ServiceNow, external facing portal from ServiceNow. I shouldn't say service portal, and make that our outward facing website. And then they slowly, Suzanne, to your question, they realized we have a wild abundance of forms, right? That things have to have wedding signature and so on and so on. And I think they had initially identified 12, not 1,200, 12. And they said, these are the ones that we can very easily convert from a paper form to a digital form. And people aren't going to make a large stink about it initially, and those departmental groups are on board to do that. And they slowly, over the last couple of years, have chipped away at putting almost all of their paper forms, PDF documents that otherwise had to be printed out and emailed and faxed and these different things, or USPS mailed in. Um, they converted all of that into digital format. And honestly, Suzanne, in my experience, what it takes is just an education for the client in really drilling in. And when I say client, I mean your customer, right? Really drilling in on why does this have to be a paper form? Does it truly have to be? Shannon, I know you've dealt with this because
Mm.
oftentimes it doesn't. It's just familiar and it's what we've done all the time. So I think asking those additional questions, why does it have to be a paper form? And then testing it out and showing that a digital form through workflow can work just as well, if not better, and deliver a faster outcome for the client. Um, Shannon, I don't know if you'd comment to
Yeah,
that.
it's not a different perspective, but I have another way that I've actually managed dealing with this challenge, which is that so I'm sure as we all know, in both federal and state government, the idea of forms for the purpose of doing business or operations is pretty standard. And even beyond that, the idea of having to change or exchange a form with another agency to be able to interact with that agency becomes standard as well too. So there's two things I would say that we've done to kind of mitigate some of this risk. I'll talk about one, then I'll come back to the other. So the first is that what we end up doing oftentimes is where there is a PDF or some type of document that needs to be created through the electronic process of collecting data, we will actually create the PDF automatically at the end of the process. So therefore, you're able to manage both form-based work and then non-form-based approach, both achieving the same outcome. On top of that, leveraging something like document intelligence on the platform actually allows you to take PDF forms that are typically just PDFs and take a scan of them or whatever it happens to be, whatever method you get them into the system, and the system will actually look at the fields inside of the PDF, interpret them, and then create the request item or create whatever the item is to process it electronically. So there really is a robust mechanism in place to be able to deal with, both mediums at the same time. So, and then one last thing I want to add there is that one of the other things we've also done before, and this is really important not to break functionality in the future, is that we have adapted screens with out-of-the-box fields in ServiceNow to meet the form requirements. So it looks like on screen, it looks very similar to the actual form that you would fill out, and that reduces friction for adoption as well. We had to do that with the Navy, actually, funny enough. So.
Yeah. Shannon, thank you for that. Jude made an interesting comment in the chat, not in the Q&A. The challenge we have is adoption of a new app over older and possibly depreciated apps. This was from a little bit
Yeah.
earlier in our conversation. You're preaching to the choir, my man. Yeah, I totally agree. And Jude, that's a conversation we could probably have over a beer sometime, and get a little bit more colorful with. The reality is sometimes what it takes is turning the other one off. You know what I mean? And that is a wildly uncomfortable thing. right outside my house, they were doing some road work, and they didn't have a barricade up for the part of the road that they were trying to shut down, but they did have a detour. Uh, I have a truck. I was just driving right through the part of the road that they were working on because it was far more convenient for me. It wasn't until they put hard barricades up that I couldn't get around without screwing up my new truck, that I started to take the detour. So, you know, I think I'm probably saying something that you already know, but yeah, that is probably one of those, just the general OCM component of this, and organizational change and changing the hearts and minds. But that's part of the reason why, and Shannon and the Configure Tech team are fantastic about this when they do their consulting with their clients, and making sure that when we roll out for our go live, you only get one shot at a first impression, right? It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to work and it needs to be easy, right? We know that ServiceNow, the platform, it's not Ron Popeil chicken. You don't, by the way, I'm aging myself on that one. You don't just set it and forget it and get a cooked chicken at the end. You're always going in and editing and updating and modifying and changing and improving, right? But uh, you don't have to wait for perfection to get started. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Um, so anyway, I know that the Configure Tech team has a lot of experience around that as well.
Yeah, we could take the whole time up just talking about OCM strategies and how
That's
to
right.
adopt the platform. But I will add this because I think it's really important. Success does come down to adoption, right? So if people aren't using the platform, it's really hard to call it successful. And so you really do have to think about those pieces to make sure that, you've got a good, customer, user, constituent experience. It does work to do the things it needs to. And so there is a lot of testing. There is a lot of activities that need to be put in place to ensure that people are trained up. They have work, job aids and all sorts of other things. So all that needs to be done as part of the strategy for deployment. So
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Um, Aaron with an E, I still haven't missed your question. Like I said, we're going to come back to it a little bit later. And for the broader group, this is awesome. Thank you so much for asking the questions. This is a much better dialogue on the things that y'all care about talking about, rather than some things that a couple guys came up on a agenda. Um, Shannon, I'm going to jump forward in our agenda that we put together to item C, the high impact government use cases.
mhm.
So, um, I think in the thread of this conversation that we're having and some of the questions that are coming, and similar also maybe to Aaron with an E's question about what are some areas of ITSM that clients don't know about that they aren't using. This is a broader elevating to the broader platform from Configure Tech's perspective, what are some workflows beyond IT that are driving real impact and value? And I know that you will do this, but I'll just say this out loud. In the context of this group here, right? Public sector, federal, state, local, education. What are some of those workflows that you're seeing clients realize lots of value with as you're working through your consulting?
Yeah, it's interesting. Here's what I would say. It's where the biggest pain points are for you know for government organizations. And so I would say done quite a bit of procurement workflows, right? So procurement, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but I don't think it's any secret that procurement, legal review, these types of things take a long time and can be very challenging for different organizations to perform. And so it's about streamlining that operation. So I've seen a lot of success in areas like legal service delivery, or the general procurement workflow overviews and procurement service management type features. Also, you know, digging into, if you think about it, like there's a whole bunch of services that legal teams offer to constituents, like you've got whistleblower type things, or you've got type of forms and different components you have. Somebody felt that they were wronged, or some type of harassment. I mean, all these different things that these teams need to be able to collect data from. And in older scenarios, these were all separate systems that were all being put up to achieve these outcomes. Whereas, the transformation strategy we put together for for a couple of organizations, quite frankly, is around consolidating onto the platform and then giving the larger procurement and legal teams the ability to be able to interface with not only the internal organization, but their constituents as well. And so it's really, and that allows them on one platform to manage all of those pieces and to manage their body of work and report on it, quite frankly. So those are the types of things that I've just, going back to, and I can go through a whole bunch more, but those are two just off the top of my head where I go, these were not necessarily something that the agencies were thinking about, but when they realized that they were able to do it, it solved the problem that they had. And so, and that goes across, all different parts of organizations that have to accept work and perform action, right? So to the extent that you have to accept work and perform action, ServiceNow can actually act in that capacity and on your behalf to be the interface for you. So.
Just to note, thank you for that, Shannon. And I agree. I'm going to add my 2 cents, of course.
Of
But
course.
I'm posting in the chat, not in the Q&A. Shannon made a couple of comments about things like legal service delivery and procurement service management, or source to pay, different things like that. I'm posting links to our docs site. If anybody on this or anybody listening to the recording is not familiar with the docs site, please get familiar with it. It's a wealth of information. Docs.servicenow.com. Wonderful place to go as a resource for information. I often will send these links out as I'm doing here to clients when they're like, "Hey, can I get a little bit of information about this?" This is a great place to go just to get some unfiltered, non-marketing, product specific information about different product areas in ServiceNow. Also, if you want to dazzle anybody about all the different out-of-box applications that ServiceNow has on platform, you go to the doc site, go to the main page, click all products on the right side, and you'll see a list of, I don't know, like 100 different links or something like that on there, which is where I pulled these two from. So just as a little bit of a takeaway for those that are in the chat, you can get a little context to what Shannon was talking about. Okay, now going, Shannon, I think you were spot on the comments. I will expand upon that. You talked about procurement. You talked about legal service delivery. I agree. I think that both of those areas in any agency, department, state, city, county group are often areas that are not thought about when it comes to improved workflows, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And those are both areas where they often use wildly legacy systems that are hyper specific to those use cases. Now, I want to point out that ServiceNow's mantra is not always you should replace what you have, right? Procurement teams use the ERP. In many cases, in some states that I work with, they use Ariba, SAP, right? But we might have Workday, we might have Oracle, we might have different systems that we are required and have to work in. And those are fantastic systems of record, right? Which are very, very necessary. What we're talking about, what Shannon was commenting on, was abstracting the system of record and that monolithic system that we have had for a decade or sometimes 3 decades, and putting a system of engagement on top of it. And that's what ServiceNow is. When you layer either an out-of-box application from ServiceNow or I'm throwing air quotes around custom, a configured or a custom built application on ServiceNow on top of those existing systems that you have, all you're doing is abstracting the experience so that the user and the customer have a more consumer-like experience as they're doing their work or making their requests or engaging with their customer, whomever their customer may be. But that system of engagement, ServiceNow, is still serving the system of record, right? So we're going to push the data down into Ariba for procurement activity. We can still pull our PO out of that system and send it to the right people. We're going to do that through a different system of engagement. So just to kind of expand on the initial topics that Shannon touched on, I'll also comment in a couple of areas. I think that there is a wild opportunity for all of us to change the way that constituents engage with our individual agencies, our cities, our counties, and our groups.
Yeah.
And I think that as a person, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, And I'm very thankful that the city of Raleigh uses ServiceNow. And in large part, what I do almost every time I talk to them is my wife and I just moved into a new home recently. We had a water main break outside. We're super thankful for that. By the way, we love the people that we bought our house from. We're super thankful that they left us with this water main break. Sarcasm. Okay. We realized after being in the home for a week, the water main break. I went through the process of notifying the city. I documented those steps. I went back to the folks at the city that we work with from a ServiceNow perspective. I was like, hey, here's some gap areas, some areas of where things can be better. I firmly believe that we as consumers and as constituents, all of us are constituents somewhere. We deserve a consumer-like experience when we're engaging with our government entities. And all of us, you're all on this call today because you believe in the power of improved workflow and doing things more efficiently. You use the ServiceNow platform or you're interested in how you can do that beyond IT. And I think if we really sit down and think about it, areas that we can truly improve are the ways that our constituents engage with us. And it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be that we're going to those departmental groups and saying, we're going to completely change everything you do. You know, you win hearts and minds like one little bit at a time. Our CEO says, you earn trust in drops, but you can lose it in buckets,
Hmm.
right? So we're just trying to earn the trust of those customers one drop at a time, giving them a little bit better technology, a little bit better way of working. And then one day they're going to go, wow, how did we end up here? Right. So we could talk about that for a very long time, Shannon, just like you were saying about the other topic. But yeah, I feel very passionately that I think that that is an area where we can all look a little bit closer at how can we be better in the way that we're serving our customers, which are our constituents. So Shannon, moving on, we can't get out of this call if we don't talk about AI.
Yeah.
I felt the eye rolls come through the Zoom, right? While we still have a captive audience, I'm not going to try to sell everybody here on how you should use Now Assist and AI and ServiceNow. What I'd like to know is, Shannon, from your perspective, you're doing consulting with all different types of clients that have a wide variety of interest in using AI technologies,
Hmm.
not only from ServiceNow, but from other platforms as well.
Hmm. Yeah.
What have been some of the things that you've seen clients be successful with the use of AI? Not literally the use and the deployment of AI, but even those that want to use it and navigating that political landscape of being able to use it. Let's start with that question. I have another follow on as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's quite a few organizations that they either don't have AI use policy in place or they have some limitations. So there's some of that out there. There's no doubt about it. And that's, I think, going to change and transform over time. But there are a lot of organizations out there where we're leveraging AI in machine learning based functions and other components like that to really start to achieve some really interesting results. So one example I think is pretty much a standard, things like summarization and making things more efficient and responding better. But there, like for instance, I know a city right now that's using ServiceNow's AI features and the AI control tower features of being able to um, take a workflow and start to assign different agents to different steps of the workflow to achieve the best outcome. Agents that are trained to do specific functions and features. And they're, using that to interact with constituents. They're using that to really pull back and start to, and they're in the earlier stages, but seeing a lot of success. And actually, the discussions I'm having with them is that they want to go further, right? They recognize the power of being able to answer these questions and interact with constituents beyond a typical chat interface, beyond a typical virtual agent interface, um, and 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 so those are some of the interesting ways. And of course, there's a lot of other ways AI can be used across the board. I mean, we use AI with different teams to be able to, manage decision-making processes and recommend what should be done versus based on, standards. So, an AI can look at all of the different standards that you need to comply with at one time, and then determine whether or not an action or whatever it happens to be is going to fit in line with policy and compliance, or it's not. And then if it's not, then it has the ability to process and review and do all those things. So very powerful and very unlimited. The only thing that I think really limits us is, what the agencies at this point in time are willing to take on. And like I said, it is. So I have some agencies that are, that are still going through their process of determining what their strategy is going to be, and some agencies that are, really embracing AI full stop. So yeah.
Yeah. Where, Shannon, have you seen hesitation? What have been some of the areas that, as you've been consulting with clients, talking to clients about either using ServiceNow or otherwise,
Yeah.
where have you seen areas of hesitation?
I think it comes down to, and this is something that ServiceNow solves pretty good, actually. It comes down to security and data leakage. And, like everything in the government, you never want to end up on the front page of your local newspaper, or your national newspaper, right? So there's always that kind of backdrop to, any type of transformation. But I would say, it does come down to really how do you secure the data so that you don't compromise your constituents' data, you don't compromise any, internal communications and things like that. And so there are ways to do that. But that's the education discussion that we have to go through and talk about architecture and talk about, how the systems are set up and how we restrict certain data types and how we, either train specific models or we put in place a security model that enables organizations to really use data in different ways. I mean, one of the things that we've done, and I'll just kind of talk about Configure Tech for a second, in
Mhm.
the AI space in particular, is we've built a security model on top of ServiceNow that allows different, based on ACLs, allows different teams to be able to access different information. And that's built on AI Control Tower and the workflow pieces and all of these other components. But that enables a really robust security model to be put in place that doesn't exist in almost every platform out there. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll have one more thing, right? And the other thing that's really important is that you don't have to build this from scratch. It doesn't have to be a multi-hundred million, $10 million. It doesn't have to be this huge project to be able to see these values, to be able to see the value from the platform. It can be in a much smaller, more focused project that has a really high impact. And that's where I see a lot of different organizations focusing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Great comments. And I would agree. Um, at the risk of this could be Pandora's box, but I'm sure there's some thoughts around AI from this group. We've appreciated the comments and the questions so far, so please throw some stuff in the QA or in the chat. I'd be curious to see from the group. Um, the levels of adoption that your departments, groups, agencies have been willing to do, right? You don't need to say anything specific, but I think we're going to run the spectrum on this call of folks that are like absolutely no, full stop, period, no AI, all the way to like open the floodgates. We realize that it's the technology of the future and we can be more efficient with it. You know, one of the things, Shannon, that I've seen that I think is might resonate with the group is, I look back at about 24 months ago, going to some conferences with some senior leaders that are particularly IT leaders, where this discussion around AI started a long time ago. AI is not new; it's been around for a very long time. But this notion of agentic AI and more substantive AI use in some of our platforms 24 months ago, no, period, full stop, not happening. I was in a room with a bunch of state senior IT leaders, and some states were absolutely not, right? Almost everyone was on the spectrum of we're trying to figure it out, right? And the conversation has always come down to governance. How are we going to govern? This kind of goes back also to one of the questions, I think maybe it was Aaron that had this notion of like lots of different people working in the same platform. well, how are we going to govern the use of AI, right? And I think one of the things that's lost is AI is not some new widget thing that we might get here and there. I think as we go into the future, my personal opinion is we're going to have AI everywhere, in everything. All of y'all that are doing procurements on the phone and buying different pieces of technology, be it ServiceNow or anybody else, AI is going to be in some way, shape, or form baked into every single one of those. And there's going to be a point where you can't buy it without AI. It's
Mm.
going to be there. So the question is, do we have a place to govern and control the use of all of those different AI technologies that we have in a roll-up sort of vantage point and put some structure around the way that we use it as IT personnel, and also the way that we allow others to use it. Allow is maybe too strong of a word, but we make available AI technologies for others to use as well. Having that structure in place from a governance perspective and putting the thought up front to say, okay, we recognize this is coming. It's not a question. Everybody's going to have it, be it in the ServiceNow platform or otherwise. How are we going to control it? And that's one of the things that, sorry, ServiceNow commercial for a second, that I think that ServiceNow has thought of and Configured Tech has helped customers do, which is put like some thought around the governance and the control and being, for lack of a better term, a control tower for AI use across the agency and across the network, right? And understanding we have all these different AI technologies and here's how we can use them. Does ServiceNow have AI? Sure. Does it have to be full-on agentic AI that replaces people? Absolutely not. Where I see some of the most value for clients using AI has nothing to do with agentic AI and people replacement. It's all about assist technologies to help that person who's working on the service desk or the contact center work more efficiently in the cases that they're working, period. And get to the data that they need faster, serve their client faster.
Yeah, and I'll add that that is where, from an early adopter perspective, being able to analyze data coming back from calls, being able to analyze data and consolidate in ways that give you insight, right? That you can't get easily any other way because the data set's too diverse and too large. Yeah, that's a real big value add, and it's a really easy because it's a really easy insertion point with a low risk and a high value to start to use AI to analyze. Well, what kind of workflow should we build? What kind of concerns do our constituents have? What kind of things could we do to make a better experience based on where the kind of questions and the kind of areas or directions that different discussions have gone in, and that can be both AI based and non-AI based. So
Yep.
it is very, very powerful, and there are low risk ways to leverage AI. And then, like I said, there are, if you start to expose some of those things to constituents and other organizations, you have to take more precaution. You have to think about what the security model looks like and things like that. But that is also very high value. It just takes longer and takes more of a concerted effort to make sure that it's done right. So
That's right. Okay, we are, Shannon, we're at the 5 minute mark here. And Aaron, with an E, I have made you wait all the way to the end. So I'm going to answer your question, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here. I recognize before I even say that, Shannon, we had a whole host of other topical areas. We were going to talk about things like ROI, budget and sustainability, workforce and building the ServiceNow team, doing more with the people that we have, collaboration across different departments, accessibility, equity, trust from the citizenry, right? Our constituents and so on and so on. Um, because of the fantastic questions that everyone here had, we didn't quite get to all the topics. So if anybody wanted to have some additional conversation, anybody is welcome to reach out to myself or Shannon by way of Carasoft or otherwise. And we are, I know Shannon, you would be happy to continue the conversation as
100%.
would I.
Yep.
Aaron, I've dragged you on for 50 minutes. So, some common features within ITSM licensing that people don't know about or that they aren't using. You know, this is a little bit predicated on, and if you're asking that question, you're probably generally familiar with ServiceNow licensing. That's a little bit predicated on what type of ITSM license from ServiceNow do you have, right? For example, if you have the government service delivery solution from ServiceNow, which includes IT service management, there is a wild host of out-of-box government-focused applications within that government service delivery product that can help you with things like grants and permitting and case management, constituent case management, so on and so on. There's a number of different government pre-built applications within that. Now, if you don't have that government service delivery solution, if you wanted to look into it, of course, you could talk to your support team. But if you have IT service management, I'll actually be super general for you, Aaron, with an E, and I'll tell you, most people devalue just basic workflow capabilities on
Mm.
platform. Honestly, it's not about have you used incident, problem, and change? Have you used request? Have you used task the right way? I think people wildly underutilize basic workflow and don't realize that I can extend request. I can create a basic request workflow, uh, leveraging the things that I already have to help really. Um, we were going back to those forms, right? Forms-based processes where people have to use a piece of paper or email or fax each other for something, or we're using a spreadsheet. Taking that and rethinking that into a digital workflow, I think that's one of the things that people miss and don't take more advantage of, right? I think also people underutilize Service Portal, frankly, and that like user experience. I'm so focused on. I said it before, and Shannon, I'd love for you to touch on this. I've said it before that you get one time to make a good first impression. If the portal that your customers are going to is difficult to navigate and wasn't built with user-based thought process, right? That consumer thought process, then frankly, if it's difficult, they're just going to walk away, right? If it's hard for me to use Uber, I'm just going to go to Lyft because I know how to use it, right? So, Aaron, I think those are two things just to quickly answer your question, and I am happy to elaborate on that more if you'd like to. I think those are two quick things.
Let
Shannon, will
me,
you comment on anything?
yeah, just real quick, because I know we're near the end, so
Yeah.
I'll go fast on some of this stuff. There are baseline procurement features inside of the core ITSM product. There are baseline HAM and SAM features inside of the core ITSM product. They don't have the workflows and the normalization, but they have the tables available. I caution you, do not turn on the SAM. Do not request that unless you're really prepared. It does change some of the pieces of how ServiceNow works. And then there's DevOps components that are out of the box as well. So, and there's a bunch more, but those are just some of the ones that, we've worked with organizations to, start putting the strategy in place with the licensing that exists, and then being able to then grow that by having a successful baseline, and then start talking about, what's the next kind of step look like to get to more value from the success that we've already had. So a lot you can do with the core ITSM license. Happy to talk about it. I do strategies with organizations all the time on how to use their existing licensing and how to put it, I put 2, 3, 4, 5 year roadmaps in place for organizations and help them figure out what their strategy is going to be, how much it costs from a procurement perspective, how to get it done, like all of those things. So it's all open and it's all available, and I'm always available for those discussions.
That's right. Listen, I'll wrap us up here by saying, first of all, thank you to Carasoft for hosting both Shannon and I, Configure Tech and ServiceNow, and making space for this conversation. Thank you, Shannon, for all your insight and your comments. Thank you for everything that Configure Tech does to not only support ServiceNow, but support the constituents, support the customers, and make the use of this platform better overall nationally. Thank you. And thank you to everybody on the phone. I got to be honest, I was a little concerned if we were going to get any questions, and y'all nailed it. So thank you. That made it so much more fun to answer the questions that you had instead of just pontificate the way that Shannon and I were. I hope that this was helpful for this group, that y'all took one or two little nuggets away. I think it looks like I put my email incorrectly in the chat. I don't know how or why. It's first dot last name, Cameron.Soleil@servicenow.com. Greg, I'll figure out how to get you the right email here in a second. But thank you everyone for jumping in, for your questions, for your comments, and we look forward to seeing what all of you do on the ServiceNow platform. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful holiday. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.